In this video tutorial, we're going to discuss the payroll report and the different settings and ways that you can configure it within SubItUp. To access the payroll report, go ahead and go to the left-hand side of the screen and click on Reports, and the payroll report is the very first one down underneath that. Now the screen is going to look like this. It's going to ask you to use the date and position filters above and then hit search to load your report. So the first thing you'll need to do is on the left-hand side, select the dates that you want to run your report for. And it's always going to be from the previous 2 weeks is the default setting. So if you need to adjust that, please feel free to do that in the top left corner. Also, the default setting is to use time clock data. So you can run this report in two different ways. The first is using time clock data from people clocking in and clocking out of their shifts. And the second is to just use scheduled data. So it's going to use whatever was on the schedule and calculate those deductions and payments from there. So if you want to uncheck time clock data before you hit load positions, then that is completely fine. If you want to have that checked and use time clock data, you can do that as well. After you load the dates in the top left corner, you're going to want to choose the positions that you're going to want to see the data for. So if I want to see just my front desk position, then I can keep that there. Remember, it's always going to pop up with just whatever's in the root position in the top left corner. That's what's going to initially come up. But if I want to see all my positions, I can do that. If I just want to see fitness attendant, I can do that. Or if I want to see multiple positions, I can choose those as well. After you've loaded your information, there's a lot of different things that you can have show up on this report if you need to see it all kind of in one spot. So we're going to go through the different options here and show you what it looks like here live on the screen. The first option here is Calculate Unpaid Break. This is only going to apply if you're using break templates or scheduling breaks within SubItUp. If you have a break and your staff are not clocking in and out for those breaks, so it should be automatically deducted, then you can go ahead and you want to leave this checked. And it's going to take out that break time from the shift time that they actually clocked in and out for at the beginning and end of their shifts. If they do clock in and out of their breaks, then that time has already been deducted. So you want to uncheck this and make sure that amount of time is not being deducted even more from what they've already clocked in and out for that specific break. If you ever, on any of these things, ever need more information or want a further reading into how exactly it's going to work, feel free to hover over this question mark that's over some of these different options here. And it's there for some of the more confusing ones and the ones that will need a further explanation. So if you hover over this question mark, it'll give you a breakdown of when you should and shouldn't have Calculate Unpaid Break checked. The next column over is the overtime column. So for the overtime column, in order to use this, you'll need to have the overtime settings box over here in the far right configured. So if we click in there, you'll need to have these active. And this is basically saying this is the maximum amount of hours per day and per week that they can work. And if they work anything more than that, then they're going to be getting overtime. And then you'll be able to put in your overtime multiplier here. So if they, for instance, my employees are getting time and a half for anything over 8 hours per day or 40 hours per week. If you don't have an hours per day max, for instance, you can uncheck that. But if you do have maxes, you'll want to make sure that those are checked. And your multiplier can be, if it's 2 times, you can have that as there as well. You can basically choose whatever that multiplier is. And then you hit save. And then when you click overtime in the top corner here, it's actually going to space out your regular pay and your overtime pay. So it's going to tell you how much regular pay your employees earned from this time period, as well as how much they got in overtime. And it's going to add those two values together for their total payroll amount. And that's basically how the overtime system works here in the payroll report. Order by last name is pretty simple. If you want to order this in alphabetical order from just using their last names, you can do that. Next up is title. If you want to have their shift title of here on the calendar, you can have that checked and those shift titles will pop up. If it was unscheduled time, that will show up as well. If you have time clock notes checked for a given position, then you want to make sure that you had the time clock notes are on for that specific position in the time clock data page. So if you head over to the left-hand side, if you go down to time clock and time clock data, you'll actually be able to click on Configure Time Clock on the right-hand corner, and this will pop up with a Configure Time Clock screen. You'll want to go ahead and have time clock notes as checked. If this is the case, then your staff is going to be able to write in notes every time they clock in or they clock out. If you want these to show on the payroll report, then you can have this checked, and those notes will show up here on your report. Next up is the employee ID number. So if this is checked, if you've entered an employee ID number for your staff, that will show up here on the left-hand side. As you can see, I have my employee ID down below here. This is if you want to enter in an employee ID for your staff, so they have this entered within the system. You can always go over to the staff page. If you go to the staff section and click on the staff member that you want to add an employee ID to, at the very top, you'll go to positions and you'll see employee ID here on the left-hand side. And you can just edit and add that in at your convenience. Next up, we have the approval tools. So the approval tools will only be used if you are using the time clock and using time clock data to run this. And basically what approval tools can do is they're going to allow you to, the manager and the employee both, to approve the hours that they've actually put in. So on the manager side, they can come right here, and this is where they can go and individually click, and either if it's an X, that means it's not approved. If they hit it as a check, that means it is approved. They can go ahead and do that. On the employee side, they can actually do this as well. It's under the time clock hours summary, and there's a video on the support side that's actually going to walk you through on the employee resources page called How to Verify and Approve Hours. So if your employees will be doing that, definitely instruct them to watch that before they go in and start approving their hours. If you want to mass approve all of them, you have a lot of them, you go through, everything is good, you can always go up here to the Add Remove All Approvals, and you can say either approve or remove all approvals, either way. And you can apply to employee or managers. So if I say manager, approve all of them, confirm, those will all be confirmed from there as approved. The next box is the GL code. So if you have GL codes checked, this will show up on the right-hand side, and any GL code that you've attached to a shift or an event or anything like that, as long as it's attached to that specific shift, it will show up here on the right-hand side. If you want to add or create GL codes and start adding those to shifts, you can easily go over to the left-hand side here under Apps, and then you'll be able to go down to GL codes, and from there you'll come to this page where you can create or import GL codes. For combined daily, again, there's a handy-dandy question mark here that'll explain kind of what's going on. But basically, turning this feature on is going to cause, if somebody had 3 punches on a specific day, so they clocked in and clocked out, and they clocked in and clocked out, and they, again, clocked in and clocked out, it's going to basically combine those into one. The total time will be automatically added together. So you won't have to do anything manually or anything there. You're going to be able to combine those. Now, these all have to be within the same position. So if they work in different positions or they have different pay rates, this will not be able to be done for this specific feature. If they have different pay rates and the rounding method of round by accrual is on, which we're going to get to here in a little bit, those are on, then this payroll amount is not going to be calculated. It won't be able to calculate daily. But if the shifts have the same pay rates, and it's not rounding by accrual here on the rounding section, then you'll be able to combine daily, and it'll turn 3 shifts all in one day into one. Okay, next up is how you are going to want to see this info on the calendar. So we have hour and minute, which is how the total time will appear by default. But if you need it to be in raw data, so 7.5 instead of 7 hours and 30 minutes, it can be done that way. And you can have that time here in the calendar, and it's going to show you total time, and we're going to get to rounding here in a second. If you need to see both, they can both be on the calendar as well. So this is going to give you the total time in outside the parentheses, and then the raw data inside the parentheses. If you need this info rounded, you have a lot of different options. There's 1/10 of an hour, 1/4 of an hour, 1/2 of an hour, or full hour. And basically what this is going to do, it's going to round up to that value, up or down to that value, depending on what you select. So you can choose 1/10 of an hour or 1/4 of an hour, and it's going to go ahead and make those calculations for you. And from there, you're going to be able to choose rounding. So do you want to round by time accrual, or do you want to round clock in out time? Okay, next up we have precision. And with precision, again, there's going to be a question mark here that kind of explains what this is. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to round everything to 3 decimal places, and then it's going to round from there to 2. So basically if this is on, you're going to get a more precise calculation. If you have this off, that calculation could be off by a few cents here and there. So just keep that in mind to have this checked. The next section down below here is all about splitting overnight shifts. So if you don't have overnight shifts, well, shifts that start at late in the evening, let's say 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and go all the way into the next day. If you don't have those shifts, you don't need to worry about this. But if you do, you have to choose how these are going to show up on the payroll report. If you have do not split overnight shifts, what this is going to mean is basically if the shift, whatever day the shift starts on, is going to count for that day, how many hours they work on one day and how many hours they work on the other. This other one, the next one over, is splitting overnight shifts on start and end dates. And you can click on this to learn a little bit more about this. But if it's selected, overnight shifts that extend beyond the date range are going to be split. So only the time worked within the selected date range is going to be included. So for instance, this ends on May 18th. So if I worked 4 hours on May 18th and 4 hours on an overnight shift on May 19th, those 4 hours would not show up on the specific payroll report if it is selected. If it's not selected, then those shifts that extend into the next day are going to show up on this report in full, even though 4 hours of it is technically on the next day in the early morning. So just a heads up, that's what basically this means. If you want to split all overnight shifts, you can do that as well. So, even ones that do not end or start near the start or end dates of the pay period, you can split every single one of them as well. If you'd like to see them almost as separate shifts on separate times, you can do that. And the last option here is splitting overnight holiday shifts. With holiday settings, you actually can set it up where, somebody can make a time and a half or 2 hours or so. And you can do that actually over in position settings. Let me show you where that is. In your position settings, for each position, you can set up a holiday setting. This is actually an organization-wide setting. So if you add a holiday in here, let's say on Christmas, people make 2 times the amount of money. You can all do that here. And for more information on how this works, definitely check out the position settings video within the support site. And you have this shift, basically, that extra time is only going to count, if you have this as splitting, it's only going to count for the hours they worked on the actual holiday. The next day will not count towards those increased hours, that increased pay rate. If you have this unchecked, then that entire shift, as long as it starts on the holiday, will count for that increased pay rate. So it all depends on what your organization does. Those are all the settings. From here, you're going to see the total amount of hours as well as the total cost of your specific employees that you have loaded and the total amount of employees. The cost comes from their payroll, their pay rates that can be loaded within the system. Once you're ready, you can actually export this into a CSV and you can modify that into an Excel file. For exporting the CSV, once you're ready and everything that shows up here is how you need it to be exported, you can click that export icon and it will automatically go down into your browser as a CSV file. If you have a couple other options here, if you want to show full time clock details, which will show everything that is related to their specific shifts, you can do that. If you just want to see employee and position totals, so you don't need to see each shift broken down step by step, you just want to see totals for employees and their positions, you can show that here. And if you just want to see employee totals only, so you don't care about their different positions or different pay rates, all that good stuff, you just want to see employee totals, you can make that selection as well. Lastly, if you want to just choose a specific employee, so if you want to just see, let's see here, I'm just going to show myself, and it's basically going to load up here just my shifts because I chose myself as an employee. So it's just going to load my shifts for this specific time frame, and up here at the top, everything is going to change. The total amount of hours, cost, and total employees is going to change to match what I have listed here in the system. Now, if I want to see just certain employees and I don't want to choose from this drop-down list, I can always start just typing it as well, and people whose names fit within these letters would go ahead and show up here. And that is the payroll report. We learned how to configure the different items to show exactly what you need so that when you export this information, you have an accurate data sheet. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to our support team. Our email address is support@subitup.com, and our phone number is 617-401-8733. Our office hours are Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much.